I'm Lena. Standing in front of the TV screen at the airport, I felt like the floor had disappeared under my feet. The news was blaring about Flight 237 from Seattle to Miami. It had made an emergency diversion to Orlando after multiple passengers fell ill, suspected of food poisoning or deliberate contamination. 12 passengers were rushed to local hospitals. That could have been me. If I hadn't listened to that mysterious warning, I would have been on that plane. Let me take you back to that fateful morning. I'm a software engineer in Seattle. My younger sister, Ava, is 26 and works as a graphic designer. She's always been the carefree one, telling me I worry too much. My dad, Henry, is 65. He was a military pilot before retiring, and he's the kind of man who values rational thinking but also trusts his gut. He's taught me to do the same. I had a big work conference in Miami. I'd been there before for similar events without any issues. The morning of the flight, I woke up at 4 a.m. I'd stayed up late the night before finalizing a presentation for the conference, so I was completely exhausted. I called for a ride and arrived at SeaTac Airport around 5:30. It was a typical early morning scene at the airport. Business travelers and families starting their vacations filled the place. I was wearing jeans and my favorite blue hoodie, carrying my laptop bag and a small suitcase. I'd checked in online the night before and had my boarding pass on my phone. Flight 237, non-stop to Miami, seat 12A. I went through the security checkpoint as I always did. Took off my shoes, emptied my pockets, and put my laptop in the bin. After going through the scanner and getting the okay, I sat on a bench to put my shoes back on. That's when a woman in her 50s, with silver gray hair and a long black coat, brushed past me. She mumbled an apology and walked quickly towards the gates. I barely paid attention. It's common to bump into people at airports. As I walked towards my gate, I noticed my bag felt different. When I opened the front pocket, there was a photo I'd never seen before. It was a 4x6 printed photo, the kind you get from a local photo shop. In the photo, there was a person asleep in an airplane seat, head against the window, wearing a blue hoodie. It took me a few seconds to realize it was me. I recognized my hoodie, my hair, and the small birthmark on my cheek. But I had no memory of this photo being taken. My hands started shaking as I turned the photo over. In neat handwriting, it said, "Don't board Flight 237. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and checked my boarding pass. It was indeed Flight 237, departing at 7:30. My logical mind started working overtime. Maybe it was a prank from a co-worker who knew I was flying. Or perhaps someone had photoshopped my face. But the more I looked at the photo, the more real it seemed. I could see the exact pattern of the airplane seat behind me, the wing outside the window, and the way my hair fell. This was no fake. I spun around to look for the woman, but she was gone. My first thought was to call my dad, even though it was only 6 a.m. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. I blurted out everything as fast as I could. He was silent for a long time, then asked me to take a picture of the photo and send it to him. My hands were so shaky that I had to take 3 tries to get a clear shot. After looking at the photo, he started asking detailed questions in his serious military pilot voice. What was in the background? What was the seat configuration? Were there any airline logos? I described everything I could see. Then he said, the seat fabric and configuration match the aircraft used on this route. This is from a real flight. Don't board that plane, Lena. Something's very wrong. I was torn. I had an important presentation at the conference, and missing this flight meant missing the first day. But my dad's tone was full of genuine fear. I walked slowly towards gate C12, where Flight 237 was to board. I had about 20 minutes before my boarding group was called. I sat near the gate and studied the photo under better light. That's when I noticed a part of a face in the reflection on the airplane window, just the eyes and forehead. The eyes looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. Also, at the bottom of the photo, there was a date and timestamp. It was printed yesterday at 4:15 p.m. At a local photo lab. Someone had printed this photo recently to give it to me. I called Ava. She answered right away, worried because I never called her so early. I told her about the photo and the warning. At first, she thought I was overreacting, but when I sent her the photo, she went silent for a while. Then she said the photo was real and I should show it to airport security. I went to the gate counter and showed the photo to a woman named Emily. Her expression changed from polite to concerned immediately. She called airport security. 5 minutes later, 2 TSA officers arrived. I had to tell the whole story again as they examined the photo and wrote down my information. They took me to review the security footage. We saw the woman in the black coat standing close to my bags. It looked like she slipped the photo into my bag. But she was wearing big sunglasses and a hat, so it was hard to see her face clearly. She disappeared into the crowd near the restrooms. The TSA officers contacted the airline, and Emily's supervisor joined the discussion. They pulled up the passenger manifest for Flight 237, which had 156 people booked. The supervisor explained that without a specific threat, they couldn't cancel the flight, but they could rebook me on a later flight for free. My logical side said it might be a prank, but my gut was screaming that something was very wrong. I told Emily I wouldn't board Flight 237 and asked her to put me on the next available flight. She nodded in relief and started rebooking me. I heard the final boarding call for Flight 237. I watched through the gate window as the last passengers, including a young family, walked down the jetway. A wave of panic hit me. Should I warn them? But what could I say? The TSA had said there was no credible threat. The jetway door closed, and the plane taxied away. I called my dad and told him I didn't get on the plane. I could hear the relief in his voice. Emily gave me a new boarding pass for a flight at 11 a.m. Which meant a 3.5 hour wait. I went to a coffee shop and tried to work on my laptop, but I couldn't focus. I kept looking at the photo, trying to figure out who gave it to me. I texted my boss, saying I missed the flight due to a security issue and would arrive on the 11 o'clock flight. I didn't mention the photo, it sounded crazy. As time passed, I started to feel foolish. The flight tracking app showed Flight 237 was on schedule. Maybe Ava was right, and it was a prank. But then, at 9:17 a.m. I heard a commotion at a service desk. An airline employee's face was pale, and others gathered around her, looking shocked. I heard words like emergency landing, Orlando, and medical emergency. I asked which flight, and she said it was Flight 237. 2 TSA officers found me and took me to the security office. There were more TSA supervisors, airport police, and 2 FBI agents. They wanted to see the photo and hear about the woman. I told them everything I could remember. The FBI agents asked if I'd ever had an incident on a flight. Then I remembered a flight to Denver 3 months ago. I was so tired that I took a sleeping pill and slept through the whole flight. That's when the photo must have been taken. The FBI agents cross-referenced the passenger manifests of the Denver flight and Flight 237. They found a match. A woman named Carol had been on both flights. Carol had worked as a flight attendant for 20 years. 6 months ago, her son died in a motorcycle accident caused by a reckless driver who got a light sentence. Carol took a leave for grief counseling and returned to work 3 months ago. When they showed me Carol's employee ID photo, I recognized those eyes from the photo. Carol was the one who took my picture and slipped the warning into my bag. The FBI agents tracked Carol's movements at the airport. She wasn't scheduled to work on Flight 237 but was there to warn me. She was arrested at her home in Seattle 3 hours after the emergency landing. She confessed that after her son's death, she was in a deep depression. She wanted to create chaos to show how tragedy can strike anywhere. She used her access to contaminate the in-flight meals. But when she saw my name on the passenger list, she remembered me from the Denver flight and couldn't let me be on the plane. The 12 sick passengers recovered within 2 days. Carol was charged with multiple federal crimes, including reckless endangerment and tampering with consumer products. Her trial was 8 months later, and she pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the trial. I couldn't face her. Instead, I stayed in Seattle. My dad came to my apartment and stayed with me for a week, and Ava visited too. The FBI called for follow-up interviews and connected me with a trauma counselor. It took me almost 6 months to fly again. My first flight after that was to visit Ava in New York. My dad came with me. I didn't sleep on the flight. I watched everyone around me and kept my hand on my bag. But the flight was normal. 3 months after Carol's arrest, I received a letter from her, screened by the FBI. She wrote about her son and the grief that drove her to do what she did. She apologized for the terror I experienced at the airport. She said I reminded her of her son, and she couldn't hurt me. I read the letter twice and put it away. Now, more than a year has passed. I still keep the photo in my desk drawer. It's a reminder that life can be unpredictable, and sometimes, trusting your instincts, even when they don't make sense, can save your life. If this story makes you think about the warnings you've ignored, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. Stay safe out there and listen to that quiet voice in your head.